Checklist.io.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of You Deserve Fresh Lettuce. I am your co-host, Rachel.
And I'm Delia.
And today we're going to be talking about, is he putting you on layaway? Oh, man. Delia and I were talking about, off camera, about going on Clubhouse once in a while, and we get to hear these celebrities
stories,
talk about how long they were engaged, and then they get married and the wedding lasts 2 years or something like that.
If that.
But I heard a statement that really struck me, and I was like, oh, we got to talk about this. And the statement was a man who said on a live, he was talking about relationships, he said, a man can date you for 6 years while he's looking for the love of his life.
Oh my goodness. But okay, so here's my thing. I wonder if that has to do anything with the fact that you're always... People are out to get bigger, better. And so they're like, she's good, but I could do better. And so you're willing to give up everything in a basket to get the bigger basket. To be like, I could do better than this basket. And so when you really put things into perspective and you realize, you know what, maybe that is the best thing you're going to get. Or maybe the person's like very dramatic, toxica, wants to fight, and you're like, do I really want to spend the rest of my life with this person? And not to mention, statistically, most people do get divorced. So, I sometimes wonder, are you just really smart that you're not like taking the entire plunge? Because I think like the state of California or whatever state you're in is basically telling you this is how you're going to live. And now there's a paper. With this paper, this is an agreement. This is your agreement. Now, when you're not married, there's this feeling of like double dutch where you could just kind of like go in and get out. Like, you know what? It's not going to work. But when you're married, you gotta work those perks.
So are you pro long engagement?
I'm not. I think if the person knows that he wants to marry someone and you're gonna give the ring, it should be within. I get COVID is a big factor currently, and oh my gosh, you guys,
that's like
you got a jail-free card. If that's what happened to you, but I do believe that if you decide to get married to someone or you give someone a ring, you should have some type of a date.
Set the dates.
Some type of date. At least a year to 2 years in advance.
But what about the women that they get the ring and like no joke? Yeah. Or they don't even get the ring. They're just dating the guy for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. Like literally we were on Clubhouse, right? And we heard the wife of a famous man say that they were dating, was it 15 years?
Maybe.
I think they dated for 15 years before they finally got married. Now they've only been married like 2 years or 3 years. And they're like, they seem like they're having a little bit of issues. But that's where I'm coming from. Like, when do we say we know for sure? Because I think as a woman, I think there's even like a psychology behind it. Like women know within like 90 days and guys know within like 3 weeks or something like that.
It's really, really, really fast. There might be a psychology. I do feel it's such a catch-22 for me because I feel like statistically you see the divorces and it happens and you're like, yeah, but you don't want to go down that path. And I know that when I was much younger, I got to tell you, I was always very reluctant when it came to like prenuptial agreements or anything like that. But when you are coming into a partnership, like, if you're going to open up a business, you have to have some type of an agreement.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel that when you come to an age where you're like, you know what, should this not work just because statistically the numbers don't speak for themselves, then I think that both parties will go in thinking, okay, I'm protected, she's protected, we're going in because we love each other. But the whole putting you on layaway for like 6-7 years, at that point you have to put yourself in a position like, what is it that I want? What makes me happy? What does he want? Because at the end of the day, like, this lifetime is so short that you got to make sure that you can find whatever makes you happy and say, you know what? I'm okay to be alone. Like, I'm okay to be alone. I'd rather be alone than in bad company. If you can have that perspective, even if you're on layaway, then you're just like, okay, well, do your thing and I'm going to do my thing. And then there will be someone for you. You may be wasting your time sometimes too.
Okay, I agree with you. I also understand, like, even if you date somebody for a very long time, it's not going to ensure a better decision when you get married. And here's why I think that. I'm all about the shorter engagements, not as short as your engagement was to your ex-husband, which was like 60 days or something like that. Yeah. But what I will say is, in the old days, if we look at the old days, which don't exist today, right? But we look back often and go, why did the couples back then last 60 years married, right? I still see that come up on social media.
Yeah.
And having two sets of grandparents who went the long haul and that route. I mean, a lot of it was just plain and simple. If a guy had a crush on a girl and he had sexual desires towards her, he had to marry her. So they moved quickly. Yes, you have the stories of the ones that went, behind the shack and hit the hay or whatever. That's literally the term, hit the hay, because they're like rolling around the hay, without their parents knowing. That was a little bit of a thing, but not as much of a thing now, where everyone's just like, oh, we like each other, let's have sex. And like, so I feel like that's part of the dynamic. Like, men were willing to dive in because there wasn't like all these women everywhere giving it up, that they had all these options. Right. Second, I really believe that if you are in a relationship, that you should know why you're dating in the first place. If you're just dating, like Delia says, like, just because you're lonely, or just because you're a man eater, we just did an episode about that, or you need someone to help you pay your bills. Like, I think you got to get into perspective very clearly why you're dating. Like, for me personally, I don't date for sport. So like, there just has to be some general criteria. I keep my mind open and my options open, but there's always this kind of general criteria of like who I'm willing to sacrifice my time for, and my energy. So if I go in, it's because I'm courting to like find a life partner, a husband.
Right. And I think if the person has already given you the ring, because obviously they're putting you on layaway. If the person has already given you the ring, we as women have the ability to take the reins and say, okay, these are the venues that I looked at. What is our budget? What can we work with? What are we doing? Are we going to go to, Hawaii? Are we going to go to Mexico? Where are we going to get married? Where are we eloping? Where are we not eloping? Who's invited? And I think at that point, you as a woman have to take the reins and say, this is the next step of what we're doing, of what I want.
Assume. And
just
that
go
it's
forward.
Like,
yeah, absolutely. Now, if the guy doesn't necessarily want to get married to you, that's different, because we did an episode on that also, where you're asking the guy, like, when are you going to propose to me? And you've been married, and you've been together like 5-6 years. You live together. And if he hasn't popped the question, he probably is okay with just having the cow and the milk and the cheese and all the perks that you give to the person without having to commit to you on all levels. Now, nowadays, I get it. Again, I understand, statistically, the numbers speak for themselves. And as a man or as a woman, and being divorced already, I would be a little reluctant to go forward. I mean, I'd have to know that, like, God forbid that guy or that man gets cancer. Like, I need to know that I can hold his hand to his death, and vice versa. Because life is that crazy. It's good when it's good, but when it's bad, are you going to be there? And so if you have a partner that is going to be there for the good, but is going to be there for the bad, and you can see that in them, because you see the qualities in people.
Oh yeah,
you can kind of see, like, you can gauge people and say, she'll be there for me on all rights. Yes. But if she's not, you got to think about that.
I told a story in one of the very early episodes about after my marriage, I went for like 6 weeks to this family counselor, not a family, like a therapist. Like therapist. Yes. I hate to say therapist, because it was like, but everybody's like, you should go talk to somebody just to help you through. And I wanted to do the work. And so I was fresh off the divorce, like fresh off hit. He like moved out, and a week later I booked the appointment to talk through. Yeah, it was fast. And he was the nicest old man. I feel like he was semi-retired and kind of just doing this. But he gave me such great perspective in those 6 weeks. And one of the things was, and I mentioned it before, like I said, he said, no one can fake it for 2 years. And so he said, you're going to likely, because you're now, like, I was in my 30s. So he's like, look, once you're not in your 20s anymore and you've already been married, divorced, had the kids, guys that come forward, they're going to be proposing quickly. And so I totally believed him and everything. And he said, and this is what you need to do. If they're dating you for 6 months, they're already thinking marriage. In those first 90 days, they're already like assessing the situation, and they've already figured out your marriage material. He goes, from there, you are going to hit about 6 months and you're going to realize it. So he said guys and girls were a little bit different.
Okay.
And then he said, but don't do anything. They're going to probably propose to you between like around 6 months to a year, is what he said. And then you make sure you do not set that date with earlier than a year. So that way you're 2 years together. And he said, because no one can fake it for 2 years. You're going to see all the red flags.
Oh, right.
But he also said, don't let it go too much longer than that. He said 3 years maximum from dating to engagement to the wedding day. So I said, okay, well, why the maximum?
Yeah.
Right? And he said, because there are so many things that you need to discover about each other in a marriage that you learn by living together, that if you live together before you get married, you're going to break it off. Oh. But if you're married, you're going to say, this is part of marriage, this is part of the discovery process, and I got to work it out. But the big deal breakers usually reveal themselves in the first 10 years. And I just was like, this is gold. Like, this dude needs to write a book, you know? And so I'm just sharing this with you ladies once again. I'm reiterating, because if you're in a 6-year engagement, I guarantee you he's already figured out
he's looking for the better thing.
That he's probably looking for something else. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but the reason I'm saying is because maybe when he gave you the ring 6 years ago, he was in that 2-year, 3-year stretch where he's like, yes, she's the one. And after that, you've done a bunch of things to prove to him that maybe it's not the one. Things that would have worked out in the marriage stage.
Right.
And so that's where I'm like,
I always remember that conversation, by the way, and it's going to sound a little redundant for me, but I do know that, like, I've dated guys for like over a year and a half. And literally, like, the first at least 9 months, it is the state of newness, which is like the beautiful thing. Like, you want to spend every weekend with them.
The butterflies.
You can't imagine your life without them. And then after the 9 months, there's like a couple little things that kind of bug you, but they're kind of highlighted. And you're like, oh, I'm being a little bit extra. I'm being a little bit annoying. And then after a while, you're like, no, this is gonna be a problem. Mm-hmm. But what my point is, the 2-year mark is what you're saying. You see it right away, and you're like, if I'm already feeling some type of way 9 months out, like from the relationship, if I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with this man, it is going to bug me.
It's gonna be amplified too.
I am not gonna be able to deal with this. So for me, I feel like, you know what, if the person is not moving forward with the engagement, then you as a woman need to say, you know what, we're engaged. I want to get married, and I want to elope, or I want to go to Mexico, Hawaii, whatever it is. Because there's a lot of like really beautiful beachy weddings. Mm-hmm. And you got to like take the reins and say, this is the next step. And in order for us to solidify this relationship, this is what I want. And we as women have the ability to just kind of push that on the men without being pushy, though, you know?
That's what I was going to say. Like, so what if there's a woman right now listening who she dated the guy for like 4 or 5 years. She's sitting with the ring on her finger. It's been 2-3 years, but she knows that he put that ring on her finger because she was nagging. And it's like a shut up ring. It's a pacifier, right? And so I've come to know a couple people, not too many, that I see the ring on their finger and I'm like, that's a pacifier. That's not an engagement ring. That's a big fat baby pacifier, chupon in Spanish. That was the shut up ring. And that's where the guy starts dodging, bobbing and weaving. I don't think I can set a date right now, honey. I'm trying to launch this practice, or I'm trying to open this, or I'm trying to do that. There's 1,000,001 excuses, and he's bobbing and weaving and like, what's the hurry? Mm-hmm. Maybe you already have kids. I don't know, but you need to like not lie to yourself. I think that's what the show is about.
Well,
is like
yes, I agree with you 100%. Do not lie to yourself. But at the end of the day, I think that we all have life goals and plans. Like if you want to launch a business, you know that okay, I want to be in this city. I want to, the square footage that I need is about this much. I'm going to design it this way. I'm going to be servicing this. So partnerships are very similar to that. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you're like, okay, I have the ring. And in a perfect world, we already have a house, we already have this, we already have that. But maybe he's not aligning with you as far as a partnership. Like, yeah. And I hate to say that marriage is a business, right? Because
no, but there's a legal aspect of it.
But it kind of is, right?
It is.
You know that like there's a balancing act that takes place. Like you're going to take care of this, I'm going to take care of that. if the person is not aligning with you and he's not willing to step up to the plate and be your business partner or your life partner, then at that point you're like, you know what? I expected us to move to this point here and we're not. So therefore, I think that you need to like really do some internal work, homework, and just say, okay, is he wasting my time? Because you can't receive if your hands are busy. I always say that. Yeah. If you have your hands, you have a box, and God says, I have another box for you.
Yeah.
But you're holding this box, he's not going to give you another box. You can't handle another box.
Yeah.
You got to let go of the box that you have, which is a person that is literally wasting your time, so you can receive a different box. And that might be the person that you are supposed to be with.
Yeah.
And so if you decide that maybe you're young enough to have children and that's what you want, then this person's just taking up your time and taking up your hands, and that box is just not going to fulfill you. And so I think it's with life, it's so difficult because you think that, I always say Disney paints this really pretty picture.
It does, yeah.
And Disney's like, oh, white picket fence, and that's the way it is, and it's not. It really isn't. It's work.
But know, I think that like if we go back to being intentional, if you're a woman who's out there dating, and I think sometimes we get a little bit scared. We don't want to scare men off. Is a big problem I think that we have as women.
Of course.
But I think to be able to, in the first 3 dates, or even in the first date when you're trying to figure out what to talk about or whatever over that dinner, to be able to, ask all the questions and have the dialogue, but to say, so do you date for sport or are you looking for a wife? If you get the courage to just ask that, let me tell you, they might have not been thinking of anything. They're probably just like, it's just, I just want to go to dinner and like, you look good and I saw you on Instagram. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? But you're going to figure that out, because if you're a very intentional woman and you're like, no, I'm looking for a husband and I'm looking for a man who's looking for a wife.
Right.
Not like I'm looking for a husband and I'm going to choose a guy that's not even thinking of finding a wife. He's just playing around, but I'm gonna convince him. You know what I mean? Then you're gonna be in for it. But let me tell you, it's like
there's women that have been able to shift that in a man, right?
I think over time, because guys, like I said, they're not always thinking about it,
right?
And then they experience you and they realize, oh my gosh, maybe you trigger something in them, But at the end of the day, if you have a pacifier on your finger and it's been 6 years and you're still with that pacifier and there's no date, this is what this episode is about. It's like, we're here to sound the alarm for you and be like, honey, he put you on layaway. Like, it is not easy to like say it, but there are so many stories. Let's just take, for example, John Cena. He was dating one of the Bellas.
Of course.
I love her, by the way. And they were dating for a very long time, and he was adamant, no marriage. Uh-huh. She finally was like, come on. And 8 years, something like that. And she just couldn't convince him to get married. He was adamant he wouldn't. Anyways, they break up. She ends up with some Dancing with the Stars guy. And I'm talking about out of nowhere, he got married. Like, he met someone and like he's married. And I've seen this so often where they're dating one for a long, long, long time, but then they break up for whatever reason, and then they meet someone else, and then they get married. And it's like, so many guys will tell you when they know, they just know. When a guy wants something, he stops at nothing to have it. Right. And sometimes they're hesitant. They have voices in their head. They have other people in their life telling them things. But deep inside, they're like, oh my gosh, there has to be enough there to get them to take action. Right. And if they want you there because they do enjoy your company and how you make them feel, but, there's a but. There's no, you want to be married. He's like not even talking about it. I don't know. That's layaway to me.
It is a little bit layaway, but I do think that a woman should never pressure a man to make a decision. Nope. I think that you gauge a man. Like, if you date him for a little bit, I'm not so pushy to be very forward with you. Like, I'm not. And I eventually would love to be married again, but I'm not in a rush to do it because I've been there, done that, and I understand that it's not just as beautiful as it sounds. There's a commitment part. There's a things that people don't talk about that, it's like running a household. It's the chores. It's the commitment.
The ring is like, do my laundry, cook my meals, sit on the couch, watch Animal Planet.
It's just like, you belong to me, you belong to me, you belong to me.
And the dating part is so fun. Because the dating part is like, they bring out all the stops. You get to go to cool places and have nice dinners.
And then all of a sudden, that could stop, depending on the man that you're with, right? If he's more of a homebody. I mean, if you're not, then, you guys are all all game and you guys are doing still the fun things. But in my opinion, I feel like if you should date someone, you kind of can gauge whether or not they're kind of veering towards that part of their life. And if they give you a ring, which is amazing, you as a woman have the ability to say, hey, what's going on? What are we doing? I looked at these venues. This is what it is. Let's move forward. Now, if the guy doesn't want to move forward for whatever reason, you can kind of gauge that too. Like, am I just getting a pacifier ring? Because at that point, if you're okay with it, then you continue. But it matters what it is that you want. So if you want children and you want to be committed and you want to be married, because for me that was a big deal, right? Like I wanted to be married and have children. And so if I didn't have that, I didn't want it. Like I was not just going to have kids with whoever, Tom, Dick, and Harry. Those guys are like the popular guys of today. Tom, Dick, and Harry. So if the guy was going to commit to me, then I was like, okay, then we are committed, we're married, and we're going to have children. And if not, then I'm not going to do it. And so what does that mean to you? How important is it to you? If it's not that important, then you're fine the way that you are. But if the guy just gave you a pacifier ring, then you need to push that subject.
But also you need to be very honest with yourself. Because so often, right, we get into these situations where we think we know what we want and all this stuff, but we don't actually say it. We don't communicate. We just let the time pass and we hope that we can drop the hints and he'll pick up what we're putting down. And I feel like to be more intentional, not pushy, but like Delia's saying, if you get a ring on your finger, that's the green light. That's the go. You got a ring. You put that everywhere. Let everybody know we're engaged, right? He's going to be like, okay. And then go to him and be like, okay, here's 3 dates because of the weather or whatever that seem like would be perfect. Which one, babe? And if he's like, well, blah, 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 just go, well, I'm going to pick one of these dates. I just wanted to go to you first to see if you had a preference. And if he's like, well, why are we rushing so fast? So just say, well, we're engaged. So now we got to set the date, whether that's 18 months from now, whether that's a year from now.
Right.
Like we got to get ahead of the ball here.
Yeah.
And so when he sees that, and if he's dragging his feet and you hear excuses and all this kind of stuff, those should be alarms going off in your head. And I'm not saying destroy the guy, but Delia's onto something here. It's like you should be planning, setting the date, and if he's dragging his feet, you might be wearing a pacifier.
Yeah, no, and I think it's different for everyone though, because I think depending on age, whether you've been married, you're divorced, it just depends on where you're at in your life. So for me, obviously, I've been divorced, so I'm a little reluctant to move forward, right? Because I've had people like kind of throw it at me, like, I would love to marry you, and I'm just like, I'm not ready for that. But there's people that want that, and there's people that want to be married and want to have children. Eventually, I want that, yes. But there's, if it's gonna work or not. If you guys have a really beautiful dynamic, you don't fight, you guys, get along, you guys have already been doing this lifestyle, then the likelihood of you, getting married and making it happen is going to continue. But it's got to be on the woman. The woman's the one that kind of has the reins a little bit more, right?
In a lot of areas, because like you're saying, there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to talk marriage with you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that you just want the marriage. We actually talk about that before.
Right. No.
Like I think for me, I'm not looking for the marriage. I'm looking for the right guy, that I can marry, right? And so there might be other guys that you start to get to know them, and they're like, oh my gosh, if you were my wife, I could totally da-da-da-da-da-da. And then you go, oh yeah, it sounds great, but it's not the right guy.
Right.
I'm not even going to go down that road. Like if he's already that serious, I'm going to find a way to get out of that situation.
Right, of course.
But when like that's my point. Like when it's the right person, like you just know. And if you're very like, sure, this is what I want, don't deny yourself that. Don't dumb it down. Don't dim your light just because he doesn't seem to be talking about it as much, or you feel like you might scare him away, because there's a way to do it without being naggy.
True.
Because
I always say like being naggy is like not the goal, right? Like to be like,
nails on a chalkboard, like
ring, you don't want to marry me, and we were it's like shut up, like shut up. And and if you're not aligning and you are really kind about the way that you're going to be presenting this to your significant other, and you still see he's kind of holding back, at that point you need to say, what is it in me that I want, and what is it in him that he's not giving me? And at that point, without being rude, you're like, you know what, we're not aligning and it's not going to work. And so you have to then say, you know what, this is what I want ultimately. And you're not giving me what I want. And it's not to say like it's my way or the highway, but at the end of the day, you're the only one that has the ability to, you're the only one that wakes up with yourself. That, you carry this avatar by yourself. So it's your feelings. And so you just kind of have to do whatever makes you happy and say, you know what, this is what I want. And if I can't have it, I'd rather not have it. And on point, just on period.
That's it. And there are people though that will be put in a situation where they really want to marry this particular person, and the guy is just like, it's not what I want to do. And at some point she says, I just love him, and if this is how it's going to be, I'd rather have the crumbs of him that he's giving me, because that's really what it is, and I'm going to make a cake out of those crumbs. Instead of him saying, I want to give you the cake, I want to give you the best freaking cake I can possibly give you. Ladies, there is a true difference between a guy that is all in and a guy that just isn't. Like, there is a clear
there is and there isn't, right? Like, for me, I have to say, and I hate to put it back on myself, but because of my life experience, and this is how it is, it's like, you get engaged so fast, you get married, and so then it seems like they're going to give you the cake, but then the cake or whatever they're going to give you, there's also like all these little things, that strings attached to it, where they're like, well, this is what I'm going to do, and if you like it, and if you don't, I don't care. And so at that point you're like, yeah, it's not worth it either, though. Like,
but that's why not 60-something days.
Yeah,
that's why 2 years.
2 years. Yeah, I agree.
Because it's true. If he's going to hand you the cake and he looks like he appears to be handing you the world, you have those 2 years to really figure out, is this frosting? Is this cocaine? Is this poison?
What
you know what I mean?
This?
Like,
what are you feeding me?
Yeah,
what is this?
You have time to taste and go, what are the ingredients in this cake?
Ingredients. You're like,
exactly.
This is not what I was expecting to be. This is not what you're dishing me.
And I always have this little saying that when I would teach my sons not to lie,
right?
When they were little, and they would sometimes exaggerate or tell these little lies. And so I would say to them, listen, here's what it is. If I hand you brownies that look so good and they smell so good and everything, but I put 1% in there of cow manure, are you still going to be like, well, guess what? 99% of it is good. Or are you going to be like, this has cow manure in it. I go, that's what a little lie does. It so muddies up the rest of your truth. And it really stuck with them. But the reason I'm using that analogy is, like, if he's handing you a cake, you got to decipher the ingredients of that cake, because so many guys want to hand you the world. If the guy's not even trying to hand you the world, like, he's not even trying to hand you a cake, he's saying, here's some flour and some water, like, be glad. Like, can't say I never did anything for you.
Yeah, right.
And you're trying to impress and be like, these crumbs you gave me, look at what I built with it. Look what I made with it.
Baby.
To impress him? Oh, God. You know what I mean?
No, but at the end of the day, I think if there's a take back from this, all we have to say is, you as a woman have the ability to have or take the reins and say, listen, I love the ring. The ring's beautiful. And
I love you,
and but this is what I want. We are going to have 3 choices. These 3 choices you need to pick on. What are we doing? Are we just wasting each other's time? And at that moment, no one's going to give you the time that you give. And I always say, life is this way. When you realize that maybe you are wasting your time, and there's a dark hole, it's a waste of time when you come to the realization it's a waste of time and you're putting more time in there. And it's not until that time that you say, you know what, are we just running the clock? Yeah. And at that moment you have to make that determination. You know what, we're running the clock, so I can't give more time to this. We either make a decision or we don't, and we move on. So I think that's when you're wasting your time, is when you realize, like, the clock is just clicking and there's nothing happening. At that point you have to make that determination, like, okay, we're running the clock, and I have to get out of this because I deserve better. I deserve fresh lettuce.
I deserve fresh lettuce. Listen, if you're a young lady listening to this and you're like, what the hell is layaway?
Yeah.
I don't know if they still have that anymore.
Yeah.
It is when you take something and at the store, and you tell the store, I want to put this on hold,
right?
And I want to possibly buy it. Don't let no one else take it. And there was like a department in the back of the store, and then they would take that item, put your name in it, register it to you, and then you would essentially kind of pay payments towards it. But then if you didn't want it, you didn't like lose all your money or something like that. And so they had it on layaway. No one else could have it.
Yeah.
You, in fact, don't even have it.
Right.
The store still has it, so that means it's not accessible to anyone.
It's very
and
private.
you're investing the bare minimum,
right?
Just so that no one else will take it.
Gets it, yeah.
And so when we say, "Are you on layaway?" Does he have you on layaway? He might be buying you the Pam bags. He might be taking you to dinner once in a while,
giving you a nice car.
You might get to live in his house.
Live with him.
Yeah. You know, hey, buys you the whatever, but there's no commitment. He's not actually, he's just taking you off the market.
Right.
But he's not giving you
commitment.
That commitment.
Yeah. And so at the end of the day, you have to figure out what makes you happy, and what would, if that makes you happy and you're okay with it, then by all means continue doing that. But at the end of the day, I think like we're only getting kind of older, and so we have to solidify our relationships and say, you know what, you gave me a ring for a reason. It wasn't just to like shut me up, but what are we doing with this ring? What are we doing with our life? What are we doing with this commitment? I live with you. You know what? Let's take it up a notch. We've been together 6-7 years. Like, we're obviously probably not going to break up, so we might as well just like, even if you have to get like a post-up, prenup, whatever, that's okay. I mean, if you already know that you love him and you're not with him for whatever he has, then you're okay with that. I mean, as long as you know what your entrance and your exit strategy is like, then hey, by all means, get it done, get it drafted, and go about your day.
Definitely go out of your way to eliminate all of the so-called excuses that are being placed in front of you, like a racer on the racetrack he's running, and there's these hurdles he's jumping into. He might be putting those hurdles, and you're just doing, I jumped over and I cleared it. You got to just get really good at eliminating those excuses. And if there's like 3 and that you've eliminated and he's still putting more, you need to go, wait a minute here. Yeah. It kind of feels like you're blocking the wedding. And just call it what it is. Guys appreciate directness, not boldness, but just being clear.
Yeah, of course.
And you know what? He's going to be like, well, I just, and you got to be real. That's where you got to be real sober, real honest, and read those signals.
I agree.
But you know what? Like Delia's saying, if you're okay just being in his life and you're okay having the things that he's giving you.
And even if you have children together and that's okay, and you guys are just kind of doing the do, then, it's at the end of the day, it's like whatever makes you happy and whatever makes you comfortable. And at the end of the day, also, a paper is not going to either make or break you or even make it stronger or weaker. If you guys have an understanding and that makes you happy, then by all means do it. However, I think as women, you have the ability to just kind of push that subject a little bit more to say, you know what, let's make this happen finally. Let's get this done. I want to marry you. I want to be your life partner forever. And then you just get it done. And if it doesn't work out, then you just kind of like go about your merry way. So I think that's all we got.
Yeah, it is. You know what? Thank you so much for tuning in. Go ahead and stay till the very end. You're going to see a mantra that we put together that you can screenshot and say to yourself whenever you need a pick-me-up. And it's a nice reminder that you deserve fresh lettuce. Cheers.
So cheers.